Dallas, if you'll take us public. Okay. We'll go ahead and call this regular City Commission meeting of May 10th to order. I'd like to begin with an approval of the agenda. I have no modifications, changes, or amendments. I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Clark. Are there any questions or comments from the dais on the motion on the floor to approve the agenda with no amendments or changes? Seeing none from the dais, Dallas, if you'll put our phone number up, ladies and gentlemen, we've just called tonight's regularly scheduled commission meeting to order. We have a motion properly seconded on the floor to approve the agenda as it was published with no changes. If you'd like to call anything, something should be on the agenda tonight, something's not on the agenda. Now is the time to bring up that consideration. You can accomplish that by dialing the phone number on your screen. That'll get you in the meeting. Once you're in the meeting, look at the bottom of your screen. You see a little hand symbol. Click that hand symbol and let us know you'd like to address the commission. We'll make sure you have the opportunity to do so. Again, in these hybrid meetings, we have a 30-second delay between our live feed and our YouTube feed. So we're going to begin with live comment in the chamber, then we'll go to virtual comment. Do we have any live comments on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, we'll go to any virtual comments. Do we have any virtual comments, Dallas? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, and I would like to invite the chaplain of the American Legion to come down and give us tonight's invocation. When we're in a hybrid meeting, ladies and gentlemen, we'll ask you to stand if you're here live. If you're on the Zoom and you want to bow your head, that's perfectly acceptable. Either one is fine. Welcome, chaplain. We appreciate you. And please, at the end of the invocation, remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Chaplain.
I'm honored to be here and I'm honored to be called here tonight. And before I give the invocation, I just have one message comes from Psalm 21. You know, do not go into count. That's my message for tonight. I come here to bring the city of Newberry reading, and I also come because God is in our favor and God is with us. Time and stuff is going on, and people are doing this and doing that. Newberry is always stood above anyone else in the world. So I thank the mayor, who I'm glad he got for the second term, and I thank the whole council and moving now for this time. So with that, I say, God bless and keep us in prayer. And let's just
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Clark.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Chaplain, for those words. We appreciate it. That's going to take us to presentations. We have one presentation on the agenda tonight. It's our comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending in September 30th, 2020. If you want to, I think your mic is working, but if you would prefer to stand at the podium, either one, we don't have a camera there. So if you would come to the podium, that'd be. But that's the trickiest clicker button that exists. So as long as you have it turned on, it should work. I'm muted.
All right. For those that don't know me, I'm Barbara Boyd, an auditor with Purvis Gray and Company, and I'm the partner in charge of the engagement of the audit engagement for the city of Newberry. And with me today is Kevin Smith. He's the manager in charge of the engagement. So I'm here tonight to present the city of Newberry's fiscal year 20 financial statement audit results. So we'll briefly touch on the audit results and then go over some very broad overview of financial highlights. So for the audit results, the type of audit report issued on the financial statements, which is in the first few pages of your bound report, was an unmodified opinion. That unmodified is good. It's a clean opinion. So that's the best that we can offer as auditors. On your report on internal controls over financial reporting, you The audit disclosed no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We look at your internal control reporting processes as part of the audit to help us determine which audit procedures we're going to focus on. And as part of that, if we found any internal control deficiencies, we would report them to you. We also look at compliance. We test that there's no significant non-compliance with your grant agreements, your contracts, any statutes, laws, or regulations. So the audit disclosed no compliance findings. There's a couple of other reports that we issue in accordance with the rules of the Auditor General. One is a report on compliance with Section 218.415 of the Florida Statutes. That statute just says that if you have an investment policy, it's got to be in accordance with that statute. If you don't have an investment policy, then you're limited to the investments that are outlined in the statute. So as of 9/30/20, you did not have any investments. So there's no compliance issues. And then we also issue a management letter in accordance with the rules of the Auditor General. And in that management letter, if there were any prior year findings, we would follow up on them and let you know whether they were corrected or not. And then if there's any current year findings or recommendations that didn't rise to the level of a significant deficiency or a material weakness, we would report them in that letter as well. So I am pleased to say that there was one finding last year that was corrected this year. So there's no new findings or recommendations or repeated findings. So that's about as good as you can get for audit results. That is a clean bill of health. And then for the financial highlights, we're just going to touch on the general fund and enterprise funds. So for the general fund, you can see your total revenues were about 6.9 million this year. That's an increase of 265,000 from the prior year, and that's mainly due to an increase in tax revenue, just based on increase in assessed values. And then your total expenditures are up about 170,000, leaving your net change in fund balance for the year, meaning your total revenues less your total expenditures, and then your transfers at $630,000. And what that means at $630,000 or $627,000 is essentially, it's called your fund balance, but it's essentially your carry forward money that you can use for operating expenditures in future years. But that fund balance is categorized into 5 different categories there. So you've got your non-spendable of the $3 million in total fund balance that you have at the end of the year. 520,000 of it is considered to be non-spendable, meaning it's in a form that you can't budget it next year. So it's either your inventories or it's receivables, long-term receivables, funds that you're not going to receive in future years. Then you have restricted fund balance that's restricted for your building function, and then your assigned and unassigned fund balance is essentially funds that you can use to pay for operating expenditures. GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, has a best practice, recommends that there's at a minimum 2 months of operating reserves there. So two months of operating expenditures and reserves. That's about 17%. And as you can see, you're at 36%. So that's a good, healthy position to be in for the general fund. For the yes. Are those?
Commissioner Barton is asking about whether the graphs are in the backup materials.
Oh, no, they're summarized. So what you show in there isn't quite, it only shows 2020. It doesn't show 2020 versus 2019.
Do you have a rough page number that we should be following you at in the booklet?
Yeah.
Or is it better to digest the book and the presentation separately?
It's better to digest both separately, but the page numbers that show the fund balance for the general fund is on page 17 of the bound report. It's about 35 pages into the report. And then the enterprise funds that we'll be talking about next are on page 23.
Before you move on, can you go back one slide? So why do we have twice the amount of, I thought we were right at the amount that we needed to fund. Did we set a higher level that we wanted to be able to fund 3 months of our city with no revenues coming in? Because you said we're at, best practice is 2,
Yeah, so
17%, we're at 36. So in my memory, we had to put more in savings because of our ASO contract, which increased how much we had to have in reserves.
so some of it may be because your expenditures were not maybe what you budgeted. I think they were about almost $1 million less than what your budget was for the general fund. So you did a little bit better than what you budgeted in terms of expenditures. And then your revenues over the prior year were slightly higher.
Mr. Mayor, I just want
Must
to
have
add,
on.
the budgeted expenditures in your general fund came in well below budget last year. As part of our precautionary measures when COVID-19 hit, we curbed all non-essential spending at the direction of your city manager, which, as you can see, our revenues came in pretty much right on target, but our expenditures we curbed pretty drastically, which led to a larger increase into our fund balance in the year than we anticipated.
Okay. So I guess my question is best practice. I'm all in favor of having 2 months. If the commission says we want to be even more conservative, we want to have 3 months, that's their decision. But if we have an excess amount in that, then we should be considering paying off debt. We should be considering other things. So
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the excess above, as you know, the commission recently adopted a fund balance policy. The excess above that fund balance policy is free for the commission to expend however the commission chooses.
so
We don't have any debt in your general fund, so I wouldn't recommend paying off debt with it. But
and remind me, the resolution we just passed was 2 months or 3?
I
Or
think
was
it's
it
2.5.
So it was 10 weeks. 10 weeks. Okay. So how much money do we have to run for 10 weeks? How much money do we need to run the city for 10 weeks?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. It'd be based off your current year's budget, which is, I want to say 7.2 million.
This is wrong slide. It was on the other slide. I thought it was 2.1,
About 1.6,
1.6.
1.5, 1.6, but we roughly think we need for saving.
We, just as a rule of thumb, working numbers, we use 1.5 to 1.6. Anything above and beyond that is the beginning of the city's, in staff's opinions, the beginning of the city's savings account for those larger projects that the commission has inquired about and asked us to look into.
So there it is. The 36% that we're looking at now is a one-off because we put projects on hold. But those projects, now that we're coming out of COVID, will automatically go back to being funded. So some of that money will go back to do the projects that were put on hold.
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, the majority of the spending we didn't do last year was operational, not project-based. For example, your recreation department basically came to a full and complete stop. So that money would be free for the commission to budget next year, however it sees fit. On page 11 of the management discussion analysis, we actually have a paragraph on it. So last year, at the end of 2020, the number was 1.75 to meet our 2.5 months requirement. So you had an excess of 363,000, which would be available for the commission.
Okay, so when we get into budget season, we'll have a conversation. When I see 36, our auditor, because remember, our auditor works directly for us. Our Purvis and Gray, not necessarily our check and balance to make sure that what we hear from our people is what is actually happening. So when you say we need 17%, you have 36, I wanted to understand why do we have so much more than what the auditor is telling us that we need? And I'm not opposed to having more money in savings for a 10-week when you're saying 8 weeks. And we'll have those conversations when it comes time for budgets. Thank you, Dallas. Go ahead. Ms. Boyd.
I will just add that 2 months is the bare minimum. So it doesn't take into account, the size of your city. So smaller cities generally need a little bit more. The volatility of your revenues and expenditures, there's different things that you take into account that are very specific to you. So 10 weeks does not seem like an unreasonable target. I'm sorry. Yeah. For the enterprise funds, your total revenues for the year were 7.2 million. Your enterprise funds are your electric, your water and sewer, and your mosquito control. So total revenues were 7.2 million. Your total expenses were $6.2 million for the year. So you had operating income of $948,000. You had some non-operating revenues of about 100,000 net. And then a transfer out of 222,000. So your change in net position before any capital contributions was $828,000. And then capital contributions, which are just infrastructure that's contributed to the city, that the city then takes on the maintenance for, were about $600,000 this year. So that's in essence a revenue on your financial statement. So it's an increase in your net position. So your change in net position overall for 2020 was $1.4 million this year versus $950,000 in the prior year. And then if we look at what your net position is at the end of the year, so net position is the enterprise funds equivalent of the fund balance. So it's the funds that are available to be spent, except that it includes long-term assets and includes long-term liabilities that your fund balance did not. So your total net position for your enterprise funds was about 21 million, but you can see almost 13 million of that is invested in capital assets. So that's your building, your infrastructure, your equipment, things that they can't be spent on operating expenditures. And then you have unrestricted net position of about 8.3 million. Of that $8.3 million, there's some that you have set aside for depreciation reserves. I think it's about over $2 million. And then you have some funds that can only be used for expansion of your water and sewer system. So that's about $1.6 million of that 8.3 million. So your unrestricted net position shows about 130% of total expenses for the year, but it's not taken into account those other set asides of the reserves, if you will. One other thing that I do like to mention with the enterprise funds is that we're looking at the 9/30/20, 7 months ago net position. That's what this number is. It doesn't take into account everything that's happened in the past 7 months. And it doesn't take into account everything that you are planning, any projects or any other capital improvements that you're planning for the future. So that's also another thing to keep in mind as you're looking at these numbers. That was it for the financial highlight side of things. There's another separate stapled letter that you received that's called required communications with those charged with governance.
Before we move away from the financials, any questions from the commission? Good. Commissioner Coleman, I don't have you on my screen. Do you have any questions about the financials?
I'm good.
Thank you, sir. All right, continue on.
So the required communications letter, as you said, Mayor, that we work for you. So there's certain communications that we're required to make to you. So if we had any disagreements with management, if management was consulting with other accountants, we would communicate that in that letter. And then there's some other, like any significant audit matters, basically. So what the significant accounting policies are in the financial statements, what your significant accounting estimates that are inherent in financial statements is listed in that letter. If we had any material audit adjustments when we came in, just errors that we found as a result of audit procedures, we would include them here, as well as any uncorrected misstatements. So if we went to management and said, hey, there's an error, and management said we didn't want to correct it, if it was above a certain dollar amount, we would include it here. So I'm pleased to say there were no material audit adjustments, no uncorrected misstatements.
What's that dollar amount?
It's pretty low. It's what we call
$10.
trivial. So it's higher than $10. It varies by, it's a formula. It's 12.
Okay.
But I am pleased to say that there's nothing for us to report in that letter. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Christian, have any questions for the presentation? Every year, you guys send out an email asking if we want to meet ahead of time I think next year, I would appreciate maybe a phone call as a follow-up. I get inundated with emails.
Sure.
And I would like, I think, to sit down and go through this with you in a more one-on-one ability, so I'd be better prepared
Sure.
when it comes here. So I know we have to communicate, but I think a lot of times the emails, they just get lost in the shuffle. And so if we could maybe put it in your notes that follow up, I'm a texter also. So you can text me and say, hey, we're over here, and that way we could maybe have a more in-depth conversation. I don't have any particular questions
Okay.
tonight, but it seems like that would be helpful to me to go through it in a more detailed way.
Okay. There's 2 times during the year where we might reach out to you. So one is during the beginning planning stages of our audit, where we might reach out and say, hey, is there anything in particular that you're concerned with that you want us to look at? And then towards the end of our audit, before our presentation, we a lot of times meet with commissioners individually, just because this is I'm well over my 11 minutes at this point, but this is a short presentation. So if you want to meet one-on-one and ask any more detailed questions, we're happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I think I'd like to kind of flip that and have one where we go through it, and then another one where you say, okay, now that we went through it and we slept on it, now what are your questions? Because often I find that my questions materialize after the meeting, So last chance for questions or comments on the board. Commissioner Coleman, just give me a head nod. You don't have to unmute yourself unless you got any questions. All right, thank you, man. We appreciate it.
Thank
We love to hear that that Dallas is doing his job back there. He does. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we come to our first opportunity, attempt for public announcements. Your commission likes to hear directly from you, so they set aside a time at the very beginning of each meeting, close to the beginning of each meeting, for public announcements. These are the non-controversial 2-minute type of announcements. If you have something you'd like to talk to the commission about that you think may take more time, we have another opportunity for public comment at the end of the night where we set aside 5 minutes. So if anyone here, again, the phone number is on the screen. If you're at home, you want to call in and let us know something that's happening, farmer's market that's going to happen, a festival that's going on, garage sale, now's a great time to do so. Call the number on the screen. That'll get you in the meeting. Click the little hand symbol at the bottom of the meeting. Let us know you'd like to address the commission. Make sure you have the opportunity to do so. We're going to begin with live public comment in the chamber, and then we'll go to virtual comment. Come on down. Come brag about that spring fling.
Yeah, is it on?
Is there a little green?
Here.
There,
Yeah,
you're
here.
good then.
All right.
We'll
Lisa
reset
Page,
that in a second.
Newberry Main Street. I just wanted to give you an update on the festival that we had on Saturday, May 1st. First spring we'd had in 3 years, and it was very well attended. We had about 35, 37 vendors. We counted probably about 1,000 to 1,200 people, which we didn't know what we would get. All the vendors were happy. I surveyed them at the end. I'm starting to get all their comments come in. Really liked it. We did a couple things different since it was a little bit smaller. So going forward, we'll see what we can bring up and do. We are also moving into our new fiscal year, which will come in July, and I'll mention again next month as well, and have, I think, a lot of good activities and good, interesting things for the businesses to try to get as many people involved in the Main Street and supportive of Main Street as we can. Certainly appreciate those of you who showed up at our festival. I didn't get a chance to come down and watch you get dunked, Mr. Mayor, but
Sure.
that's right. I heard you were there. I did not see you, and I appreciate that. And then just a little side note, I understand the Watermelon Festival is coming up this Saturday. I don't have a lot of details on it, but just wanted to put that out there too. Unfortunately, I have to work, so I won't make it, but I'll be there in spirit. So.
Mr. Mayor, at this moment, we don't, but if the commission says that's what they'd like, it will be so. Correct. It's 10:30 parade. Saturday, this coming. This Saturday, the 15th. This Saturday coming. Mr. Right. We'd be thrilled to find you a new vehicle to push back on. That's.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think my mic has been off this whole time. So I'm live now. So let me just reiterate that the Newberry Watermelon Fest Parade lineup starts at 10 and the parade starts at 10:30. We begin at Walker's Produce Stand. And last year we ended a little bit early. But I'm not exactly sure. But I think your best bet is to line up around 1908 right there at the beginning, because by the time we get down there, it gets a little light. Okay. That's it, 19. Yeah, 1906. That's what, man. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Will you say your
Since
name
it's
for the record?
Oh, sorry, Peggy Loy. My question is that the festival starts at 9. So the festival is going to go on out there, but the parade is going to be here.
Correct.
Okay.
So they usually get started with the festival. Some people like to go to the festival and then come to the parade and go home.
Well, some of us are scheduled to work at 9.
Yes. At
So,
the festival.
At the festival.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So you want to get off, switch shifts with somebody.
Well, I said I would take whatever shift they needed,
Oh,
and
that's
that was the
nice.
one they gave me.
For the Lions Club or for Main Street? Who are you?
Garden Club.
Garden. Wow. My goodness. And Mike, would you confirm with the Watermelon Festival folks? Last year we had an issue with the ticket takers being right up against the road. It caused a backlog once the parade was over all the way to the light. Those ticket takers, and maybe this is an ASO, those ticket takers need to be deep in the field so that everybody can clear out off of the road first. That was my only complaint that I fielded last year, was trying to actually get there to the Watermelon Festival. Okay, any other live comments? Okay, do we have any virtual hands raised? All right, we'll move on to our consent agenda, and Mark, or Commissioner Clark, you'll let us know if you can attend by the end of the meeting. Okay. All right, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as it was published? I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Maison. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to our first public hearing and ordinance, which is a consideration of a finding of necessity for the creation of a community redevelopment agency, which is, we call it a CRA by the City Commission. We need to create the CRA and we need to name the City Commission as the Community Redevelopment Agency. I'm sure that Brian is going to give us a little bit of history here, but this is a 30-year project that we are about to cross the finish line on, and very exciting if we can just get over that finish line. Get over that finish line. So we're very happy to see this on tonight's agenda, and I'm sure it will be on the joint meeting as well, if all goes well. Brian, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, my history is actually very brief because I kind of figured that you would fill some of that
You
in.
want me to tell
and
him
you did.
more? I can keep talking.
That's okay. Probably better we don't. So in brief, the most recent history is that on June 25th of 2019, the City of Newberry Commission and the Alachua County Commission finalized an interlocal agreement to allow for the creation of a community redevelopment agency in the City of Newberry after many years of negotiation. We'll just leave it at that. So there's two ways. I mean, finding of necessity as outlined in the Florida statutes. You can either designate areas as slum, and looking through that list, we don't really necessarily qualify in that respect. However, the definition of blighted area is much more broad, and it includes a lot of things that we do have some issues with that could benefit from the creation of a CRA in essentially the downtown core area of Newberry. We'll go over the ones that we're actually picking as part of the finding of necessity, or using as part of the finding of necessity as a justification. However, according to the statutes, blighted area means any area that has at least one of those. And so, like I said, we'll talk about a few more that we actually qualify under. I don't know why it's flipping around like that, but we have provided notice to the taxing authorities in Alachua County, although there's actually only 2 taxing authorities that will be affected by the tax increment financing fund once it's created, and that will be the city of Newberry and Alachua County. Just so everybody understands, the library district, the school district, none of those other taxing authorities contribute to the CRA. It's only the city of Newberry and Alachua County. And so these are this 5 or 6 areas that we are focusing on in the finding of necessity to qualify for the creation of the CRA. And so we'll go through those briefly. Predominance of defective or inadequate street layout, parking, roadways, bridges, public transportation areas. As the commission is well aware, there's a number of areas in the city that still have unpaved streets. We have a very significant lack of parking in the downtown area to support our local businesses. And so with some of the zoning district related requirements for off-street parking, that can make it difficult to redevelop parcels or develop parcels in the area because of the small lot sizes. And so that's an issue that the CRA could help address, either through some funding to purchase parcels and join them together into larger parcels, or using money from the CRA to conduct studies on how to go about improving that situation. Faulty lot layout in relation to size, adequacy and usefulness. This is kind of an interesting look. Out of 117 commercial properties, zoned commercial properties, only 64 of them are currently in use. And if you break it down by the different size of the lots, you can see that the majority of the available, or the majority of the lots under usage right now are of a lot size that supports no more than a 3,000 square foot footprint. The importance of that is the type of businesses that you can then fit in those footprints. And so this table talks about what we currently have in place. And then the second table looks at the overall number that we have and the potential for build out. And again, we do have a few large parcels that would facilitate something, like a CVS or Walgreens, but not many. And most of those would actually require the combination of several parcels together. And that's difficult because you're in a multiple buyer, owner situation and that kind of thing. So it's a limiting factor that the CRA can help overcome with funding from the CRA eventually as it accumulates. Again, there's the potential for purchasing those properties, combining them together, and then selling them back to the private sector just as an example of a possible outcome that would then facilitate a larger development. Faulty lot layout in relation to size continued. As you can see, we've got, I think it's about 90 parcels that you have direct adjacency between commercial and residential. Those can create conflicts between use. And again, it's something that potentially CRA funding could at least look at or help mitigate. And then, as you're all well aware, of course, we have the railroad that bisects the community interconnects, and some of that is no longer active, but a fair amount of it is. Most of it actually is. And so, as you know, we have creates irregular parcels all up and down the lines that are either unusable or difficult to find redevelopment uses for. And then also the issue of stacking. got the cars
Brian,
cars
can
that
you-
are out there.
Okay, can you go back to that map one second? So the blue line that we're looking at is the suggested map of the CRA.
Yes.
I thought there was a map inside that says this is our CRA development, but all of the money generated, is that later in your presentation?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, you found an oversight in my presentation is I forgot to put that first
That
starting
overlay.
map in there.
Okay, can you
Um,
roughly describe?
Yeah, so if you look at the blue boundary, it is roughly 1.08 square miles out of course, our total of now 58 square miles. That would be the community redevelopment district if approved by the commission. It has roughly 627, I believe, residential units, and then several hundred more vacant residential units that could be developed. 117 commercially zoned parcels, of which, like I said, 64 are actually being used as commercial entities or from commercial entities. Once the CRA is created and down the line, when the tax increment financing fund is established, the trust fund is established, that money can only be spent within this district boundary. And actually, in the interlocal agreement with Alachua County, we have a few more limitations on where the money can be spent. For instance, the undeveloped area to the northeast, there's some limitations on spending money on that open parcel. We would not be able to spend money on that parcel.
So just in summary, for those folks watching at home that may not be following this, because I didn't give a very good intro to it, a CRA basically is the city of Newberry and Alachua County are going to agree on this map. That's the blue line that you see around. And we're going to, in essence, freeze the tax base there. And any tax increases after the date that you freeze it, we both agreed. City of Newberry puts that money into an account. Alachua County puts their portion of that money into an account. And then we use that money mutually to fix blighted areas, to beautify, to lay infrastructure, to encourage growth. And then when the CRA expires, you have a much more vibrant area and everybody's tax base increases 10, 20 fold, hopefully, because you have made the area much more attractive to grow the business in. So what Brian is alluding to is that we have proposed this map. The county has tentatively agreed to this map, but it's important to know that we won't be able to spend the money that's generated in this area anywhere inside this area. We can't spend it outside of that blue line. So all the money that's in the CRA has to go to a specific area of blight, which is why we have to have this finding of necessity. Now, when we drew this map, because this has been a 30-year process, back when we first drew this map, none of that development in the north was happening, right? It's only because this has taken us so long to get here that that we actually see construction happening in a new part of the CRA. But pretty much every CRA scholar will tell you, if you just draw a CRA boundary around the area of blight, then you don't get enough money to actually change the area of blight. You need some other parcel that has the potential to get developed. And then you take that money from the new development and you refurbish the old part of your town. So I anticipate this to be part of our conversation when we have a joint meeting, is that we may have a commissioner say, well, we should redraw that line because all that new construction, that's not an area of blight. Well, that's true. But when we agreed on the map years ago, when we drew the map, none of that was there. It's only because it's taken so long. And if we take that area out, then we really hinder how effective the CRA will be. And at the end of the day, the city of Newberry and the county are going to benefit from this agreement because we're going to encourage redevelopment in a downtown area that needs some love and attention. So I still didn't quite hear, is just that northeast section the map that we can't spend, the section we can't spend the money in, or is it an even smaller map? Is that sort of
No,
triangle?
the section that in green identified as PD, it's hard
Right.
to see up there. That's the section where there's a limitation.
Just that. So everywhere else, we could spend the money on to pave roads, lay
Yes.
infrastructure, right? Run grants with our businesses, that kind of a thing.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Clark. Is your mic on?
Since I haven't been a part of this for 30 years, but this has been going on for 30 years. Just looking at the drawing, though, what makes the blight area like just get so wrapped around the axle, these lines like this? Why don't we draw squares? Is there something over here to the left that we have more of, or something that's better than not blighted? Or like on your, just looking at the screen on the left side, looks like there's a lot of neighborhood there. Is that just it's a good area that never needs reconditioning, or just how'd the map get drawn?
Mr. Mayor, there's a number of reasons for that. Number one, it's the area to the left is the area that generally needs the most attention in terms of redevelopment. It has the highest incidence of utility deficiencies, roadway deficiencies, age of the housing stock, age of the commercial stock. All of those things play into the need to redevelop. And to the mayor's point, if you look at the most successful CRAs out there across the state, it's those that had an undeveloped area as part of it that then later developed and sort of became the funding source for the redevelopment of the older, more blighted areas. And then those areas, once they start to redevelop, they increase the tax base as well and start feeding into the whole cycle, and you can spread it out. And it's not just necessarily looking the CRA program in the plan, and that'll be the next step. Is y'all will see the draft of the plan shortly and talk about the elements that you want in that plan. But it also you can have commercial redevelopment, you can have residential affordable housing programs as part of it. I mean, it's a wide range of things that can be addressed. So it's not just the commercial corridors, but it also can be improving your infrastructure to support affordable housing in the residential areas as well. So usually if you have an area that is limited, as the mayor said, to just the area that specifically needs the redevelopment, the appreciation is so slight over time.
Yeah.
You just never get there.
Gotcha.
Because it's more expensive to redevelop than it is to go to green space.
Like this here while we
But remember too, that the city, just like the county, has a vested interest in really just drawing the map around the area, because what we're saying is that we're gonna still collect the taxes.
Sure.
But everything that over from the day we say
Goes
is gonna
back in
go
the
into
kitty.
this account for the CRA
Okay.
to only be spent. So it's a limiting factor for us,
Sure.
just the way it is for them. So we want to make sure that we have a big enough area to support the CRA, but not such a big area that we hinder our ability to serve the rest of the city.
Got it.
The city of Newberry is the only city in Alachua County that has asked for a CRA that doesn't have one. Gainesville has 3, I think. Is it 4? 5 of them, 4 of them. Hawthorne, High Springs. Hawthorne has one. High Springs just had theirs renewed. Alachua. So, I mean, these are significant. This is a significant tool. When people ask me, well, why can't we pressure wash and paint all the buildings downtown? Well, all those are privately owned, but a CRA could run a grant program to help beautify the downtown area and really make it that destination downtown. And, I don't fault the BOCC entirely for this being a 30-year project. I think that the city of Gainesville egregiously abused the CRA 25 years ago and kind of made everybody put a halt on how do we go about doing this. So the city of Newberry has answered for all of those sins. And our CRA is a much cleaner, straightforward CRA. But this
I'm
green
all for it.
space on the map is going to be a conversation, because we need that green space to truly give a kickstart to the CRA.
Okay.
And just another note on the funding, as the mayor said, this year will be the base year for the taxable value within the CRA district. That sets the baseline. All the taxes generated under that baseline go into the general fund, both agencies, just as it always did. It's only as time goes on and that incremental increase over and above that baseline is what you will collect taxes on and place into the trust fund. that can be spent only on projects that are in the plan within the district.
And Brian, if the city of Newberry and the BOCC agree, we could set that baseline at an earlier year. There's no legal restrictions to that. We both agree that we wanted to go back to 2019 when we agreed to have the agreement and say, well, that was our day.
I believe, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, but I think the city attorney will need to weigh in on that particular item.
Rich, do you know that I don't want to get into a long dissertation of it. We'll figure it out before the joint meeting, but it is my intention to say to the BOCC that we had this agreement in 2019. We said to both of our staffs in 2019 that at the next joint meeting, we were going to have this thing finalized. COVID happened, no harm, no foul, I get it. But it also seems to me like we should be able to go back to the date that we agreed to have the agreement and have that as the starting date. Do you know off the top of your head, Rich, if that's possible?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we surely can put a call into Corbin Hanson, one of the assistant county attorneys who deals with CRAs, and he's been really good to work with. Obviously, we've worked with him on the High Springs CRA, and we can get his take on that, his interpretation of the agreement, and what the statutes say. And it may be that we would not necessarily have to take that back in front of the BOCC to request it if the county attorney gives it the interpretation that we want the county attorney to give it. So we can look at that issue.
Find that answer out before the joint meeting. I clearly don't want to ask anyone to do something that they're not legally able to do. But if it's legal, or if the county just agrees and that's what you bring in front of us, even better.
Certainly, we'll do that.
Mr. Martin?
Wouldn't we have already allotted that tax revenue? If we collected it somewhere, we spent it. We don't have it anymore.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, it wouldn't retroactively, whether we've spent it or not, it sets the base, which is to the mayor's point. I believe that the statute is silent to the base year. I think that's what two entities agree upon. Rich is going to find that out for us, but setting the base level so that that's what continues to fund the general fund as the base level, and then establishes where we calculate the tax increment differential from, could be very beneficial to Newberry.
So all those
I think
houses
it's
behind
worth.
Hitchcock's wouldn't be in your base, and then you get a big boost, which is exactly the point of the CRA. Now, all of that would come in to helping this area of life. Go ahead, Brian.
And then the next item, unsanitary or unsafe conditions. As the commission is well aware, we have some pedestrian issues. In fact, I know at least one commissioner's made some attempts at some creative crossing tools to help people get across safely. And so again, that is an issue. Pedestrian safety is something that CRA can help address in the downtown area. There's definitely a need for some sidewalk work in the old Newberry neighborhood areas. We have quite a few streets that have no sidewalks, don't even have them on one side of the road. It's a potential plan item. And of course, we've talked before about stacking of railroad cars adjacent to the residential areas. It creates an opportunity for criminal activity, vandalism. Depending on the payload that was in the cars, it could potentially be create danger to the residents, kids climbing on them or something like that.
I have even heard of people stealing.
I've even heard of people stealing a rail car.
It's rare, but it has happened.
Only in Newberry. That's best senior prank ever, I would say. But and then we do have a number of areas in the proposed CRA district that have utility deficiencies. The deficiencies are, some areas are unserved and some areas have an underlying utility infrastructure that needs improvement and enhancement to be optimum function. And again, to support the redevelopment of the downtown area. And then deterioration of site or other improvements, the commission has seen the different buildings along the State Road 26 corridor and what will be the State Road 46 corridor head westbound, ultimately, if the one-way pairs, assuming they go through. But it's not just residential. You know, we have both residential and commercial vacant, long-term vacant properties that over time become eyesores. And another item is having a greater number of violations in the Florida Building Code and city codes within the district area versus outside. It's a little bit of a exaggerated comparison because we're looking at a little over 1 square mile versus 56 or 7 square miles. But if you look at the concentration, while there's overall a higher number outside on an annual basis on average, it's not by much. And so the concentration is much higher in a 1 square mile area versus outside of the district. And so, that's a qualifying issue is you do have the predominance of code violations concentrated in that 1 square mile area, much higher concentration, 103 per square mile on average versus 2. Again, it's a little bit of a odd comparison just because of the size of Newberry overall. And so shortage of housing for low and moderate income residents, while this is not an actual, it's not in the definition of blight. The statutes do recognize it as a qualifying criteria for the finding of necessity. In fact, the resolution has to address the potential need for affordable housing, although affordable housing is not an actual requirement of a CRA plan. It's highly encouraged, and if you don't put it in, you do need to provide a justification for why you're not addressing it. And so, in terms of the creation of a community redevelopment agency, we're at step 1 right now. Adopt the finding of necessity. This finding of necessity report was presented here. It was researched by staff. It was field observations, data and analysis collected. Work with our GIS system. And then next step after this, assuming the commission decides to adopt the resolution, will be the development and adoption of a community redevelopment plan. We have a workshop on that next week. And after the workshop and honing the plan in further, then as the mayor mentioned, we'll have a joint meeting with the county, finalize the plan, and then assuming that all goes well, then once that's done, there'll be the creation of the redevelopment trust fund by ordinance after as the 3rd step.
So Brian, we're doing 1 tonight. We will do 2 at the second meeting this month.
Yes, well,
And then we can't do 3 until we have an agreement with the BOCC.
2 will be a combination of the workshop and then the joint meeting. And so if
how many more years of joint meetings do we have to go through before we actually are done?
I wish I could, potentially only 1.
Okay, so that's my question. It is possible.
It is
for us at
possible.
the joint meeting.
Yes, sir.
For us to finalize this 30-year project started by 2 planners ago. When we celebrated back in 2018, the CRA, we ended up celebrating the agreement to have an agreement. That was what we were celebrating, the agreement to have an agreement. And it's 2021. We're still in agreement, but we don't have the agreement.
We'll get it done this time.
We're going to get it done this time.
And so once the trust fund is established, then it'll start accumulating funds, and the funds that are in the plan that aren't expended each year, they have to be dedicated to an element in the plan. And so you can save the money over time for the bigger projects. It doesn't have to be spent every year. It has to be accounted for every year with the state. It'll become, of course, part of our audit program. And so Resolution 2021-13, it adopts the finding of necessity, establishes the Community Redevelopment Agency, and names the City Commission as the Community Redevelopment Agency.
Okay. So before I ask Rich to read that resolution into the record for us, is that the end of your presentation, Brian?
Yes, sir. That's the
Okay.
recommendation. Staff recommends.
Do we have any other questions about this project or our timeline or our hopes for finality to this? Commissioner Mazon.
See if I can get this to work. Green, right? So to go back to the affordable homes, does that include tiny homes? And what's the comparison when it comes to a tiny home versus a affordable home as far as price?
Mr. Mayor, it wouldn't necessarily address tiny homes specifically. It would address programs that would support affordable housing in a more general fashion, probably. Tiny homes could be an element of that, certainly. Again, the plan can be as specific as the commission directs. There's some value in having a little bit more general directives in the plan so that you can broaden it out if necessary and adjust.
I think generally the idea in a CRA from this area's end would be to take on some of the costs that you generally drive up. So utility hookups, making it possible to build there, those kinds of things. So I don't know that we would get so far down as in to say, you know, what type of facility should be built, but we might be able to say, well, this area that doesn't have utilities, but it's clearly an infill project, we'll get the utilities there to the site, and then the developer won't have to bear that cost. They'll just get it from the road to their actual development, that kind of a thing. Is that on par? Okay. Any other? We have a lot of infill sites around Newberry that would fit that description that are in the CRA. Prime, but because the pipe was laid down 70 years ago in a strange zigzag motion, it would cost $100,000 to get the sewer there, and it just throws the numbers all off. Any other questions? Commissioner Coleman, let me get you back on my screen. You can give me a head shake if you got any questions. You're good to go. Okay, Rich, you ready to read the resolution into the record for me?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution 2021-13, a resolution of the mayor and city commission of the city of Newberry, Florida, accepting a finding of necessity report for a community redevelopment agency in the city of Newberry, declaring that areas of the city of Newberry, Florida are slum or blighted as defined in section 163.340 Florida statutes, declaring the rehabilitation and redevelopment of these areas is necessary for the public health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the city, providing for the creation of a community redevelopment agency, providing for the members of the city commission to be the sole members of the community redevelopment agency. The appropriate motion would be to approve the resolution as read by title only.
Thank you, Rich. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Move to pass resolution 2021-13.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Clark to pass. I have a second from Commissioner Mazon. Any comments or questions on the motion on the floor from the dais? I've got you on my screen, Commissioner Coleman, so you can just give me a head nod if you're trying to get my attention. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our conversation on item 6. This is the consideration of a finding of necessity. This is the next chapter in the Odyssey of Newberry's CRA. If you'd like to call in, have any comments or questions on this epic journey we've been on, now is the appropriate time to do so. You can dial the phone number that's on your screen. That'll get you in the meeting. Once you're in the meeting, look at the bottom of the screen, see one hand symbol. Click that hand symbol. That lesson you'd like to address the commission. Make sure you have the opportunity to do so. We're going to start with live comment in the chamber, then we'll go to virtual comment. Do I have anybody live in the chamber that would like to address the motion on the floor? Seeing none, do we have any virtual comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. There's someone named Jordan Marlowe in the audience who would like to talk.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, my students, they think I'm in more than one place at a time. So
Hello?
do I need to lower my hand?
Hello? Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Hi. Thank you. This is Joy Glanzer. I have a couple questions or just a comment. The area behind Hitchcock's, I was wondering, do you think the county would really allow that to be in the CRA because it's not an area of blight? And secondly, along that lines is it really will be key to be able to go back to a 2019 baseline for the tax base, because since then, of course, that's all been so improved that the benefit of the CRA would be lost. So those are just a couple of my comments. I hope we can stick to the 2019 tax baseline, and hopefully they'll let us include that area at all in the CRA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Glanzer. I hope you heard our conversation about that area. So we make the same argument that it should be, and should remain in the CRA. Do we have any other virtual comments?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Still completely thrown by the whole George Marlowe thing. I don't know how that happened. But I'll ask Joy later. All right, we have a motion probably seconded. We have no more public comment. Virtual are live in the chamber. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. And that will move us. I do have one request. We have Sheriff Watson's chief of staff is in the waiting room. And item 7 and 9 are in-house. Does anyone object to moving our law
No.
enforcement contract to 7 as a professional courtesy?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Let's
then
do it.
we'll, if we have Miss Judd, Officer Judd, in, can you hear us, ma'am? Dallas, is she there? I see her on. the
Star 9 to unmute your phone.
Ms. Judd, if you can unmute your phone, I'm sorry, I don't know your rank. I would address you differently. This is okay. You're muted on your end.
She's not sworn. It's Miss Judd.
Okay. You can
And-
tap your screen.
That again, it's star, it should be star 9 to unmute your phone.
Are you going to begin, Mike?
I am.
Why
I'm
don't
going to
you
present
start?
the item. She's available for questions if the commission has any.
Okay, go
That's,
ahead.
that's, and I spoke to Sheriff Watson late last week. He told me that he had a conflict tonight, that he was going to try to work both. And that he would let me know. His chief of staff, Ms. Judd, contacted me just before the meeting, and she said that the sheriff was not going to be able to break free from his other obligation, and that she was going to stand in and be available for questions if the commission has any for him. So I'll just kind of jump into the summary and introduce to you what's, I guess, give you an update on where we are in negotiating a law enforcement contract with Sheriff Watson, and take any questions you have. As you all know, that we've had a contract since 2016 with Alachua County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services in Newberry. Prior to that, we were in the Alachua County Law Enforcement MSTU. The commission voted to exit that and authorized us to negotiate a contract. And for the past 4 years, we've been in that contract. Last year, we negotiated a 3-year extension that would take the cost for the contract. Last year's cost was $836,000 per year, and moved it up to a little over $1 million. It was $1,007,000. And that it was going to be that for the current fiscal year. And then it would only be adjusted by a small, about a 1% index for the next 2 years. At the beginning of this fiscal year, the commission directed me to transmit correspondence exiting the contract and primarily because the cost had jumped so astronomical. And the commission at that point said, would you immediately begin to try to initiate negotiations with, then it was Sheriff-elect Watson, to see if there's a better deal to be had. If not, we'll figure it out. And so we weren't able really to begin negotiating with Sheriff Watson until he took office in January. We've met a couple of times, and the first time we met, he asked for us to give perspective and get up to speed. But then subsequently, he researched all of their documentation on their side of the equation, and suggested that if we just look at the contract that we entered in 2017, it was a base year, and then we were increasing by 3.75% annually. And that when we jumped into fiscal year 21, the one we're currently in, it just went up inexplicably by 20% with no justification for why the rapid cost increase. And so the sheriff felt like that, for his perspective, the sheriff feels like that the sheriff's office should have just respected the 3.75%. And he's offered that to be retroactive this year to October the 1st. And then continue on for the last 2 years of the contract. So what we've been talking about is this year plus the 2-year extension that we just exited out of. If the commission likes that, and we didn't present the contract form, we were kind of just presenting the conditions. The rest of the contract would remain as it's been for the last 4 years. It would result in a savings of $140,000 this year, which would be 14% savings for the commission and the city. And over the 3-year term of the agreement would result in a savings of $350,000. So, Mr. Mayor and City Commission, that kind of concludes my overview of where negotiations are to date, what the sheriff has offered, and what staff frankly feels is a really good opportunity for Newberry. It's a good opportunity for the commission to agree and to save our citizens yet more money. So staff recommends that the commission accept this offer by Sheriff Watson, and I am available for questions or comments from the commission or from the audience.
Okay, so I want a couple of things before we dig into the details, because I led Commissioner Maison wrong. Normally, we wouldn't be talking about this on the dais until we had a contract. However, this time, since 98% of the contract was worked out, we're really just talking about the rates. That's really the only thing for conversation, and Mike needs to know whether I just go back and plug these new numbers into the already existing contracts, and nothing else in the contract would change, which is why we're having a conversation before we have an actual contract to read, because pretty much you would just take the contract that we're under. My second comment before we get into the weeds and pick this thing apart is, I just want to thank the sheriff for such a reasonable approach. Whether we end up agreeing or not, this is an extremely reasonable offer, and it's an extremely reasonable way to look and view this. And we haven't always had that relationship. So, Mr. Watson promised on the campaign trail that we would have a much better relationship and ability to talk it out. And Sheriff Watson is clearly delivering on that promise. There's this happened in a record period of time. Usually our negotiations with the sheriff's office are drug out for about a year till about a week before the contract is about to be over. And saying that we're going to go back to the 2017 when the sheriff's staff and our staff did all the work and research to come up with that original number of 746 or 752, whatever it was, and then just move from that at the rate that we agreed to then. That's a great place, whether we end up there or not. It's a great place to start. And I want to start by saying thank you for such an amicable negotiation. And with that, I'll open it up to the commission for questions or comments on the proposal. Go back to the 2017 rate, plug in a 3.75 increase for every year since then, which takes us to 860 even, 867. And then, I think if the commission is agreeable, I'd like to see a 5-year contract to lock in some stability here. We all know all the conversations we're having about law enforcement, and we're to the point now where if you guys said go 18 months, we could probably have a Newberry Police Department, but the more time we have, the better in terms of planning and growing and all of those kinds of things. So thoughts. And again, for us to run our own department, we're looking at 1.5 to 1.7. Right? So from that standpoint, you guys are going to save your residents $160,000 this year. Is it 140,
139,
139 this year, and provide
117 in that
stability along. Commissioner Clark.
Mr. Mayor and Manager, we spoke the other day about this, and I'm all for this. I'm all about the sheriff's department. I am totally not on board with financing our own police department. I'm one to get it up and running. So, and speaking with the sheriff, he's been absolutely on point and doing what he said. I think if we look at this on a 5-year deal, it ain't gonna take us long. We're gonna exhaust in 3 years, we've exhausted back down to 90,000 with this 3.75 increase. Mike, in talking to the sheriff, do you think at some point we may could get our increases reduced a little bit? So in the 5 year, we're not back to zero and kicking this thing again, because at some point, we're gonna be at over $1 million if we do the 3.75, and there's nothing gonna change except cost of increase.
Mr. Mayor, I had a follow-up conversation with the sheriff along those very lines. And you guys will know, I tell you all the time about what we believe the importance of cost indexing and what the appropriate
Sure,
value for
sure.
cost indexing is. And the sheriff, pointed out, some of the challenges with law enforcement, which from our perspective is just like our fire department. So we have a parallel department.
Sure.
So some of the things he brought up, it got us to me thinking in particular, most of the contracts that we enter where we do pricing index is a service delivery where a labor component, which is probably the most volatile of the components, is in the 30 to 50% range of whatever that cost is.
Labor.
Labor is. With law enforcement and frankly with fire protection, the labor component is in the 75 to 80% range. And so I think that it's probably inappropriate for me, and I had to rethink this because I just took it broad instead of focusing in on law enforcement services. Probably inappropriate for me to think that we could control labor costs to 2% annually, considering that laborers would like to get a pay increase, and that those average 2 to 3% plus their retirements. And we see retirement increases. We see health insurance increases. Our average health insurance increase at the city of city of Newberry over the last 6 years is about, we consider 8% a good year, and we see it up at 12 some years. So considering how labor intensive law enforcement services are, I've rethought that 2 to 2.5% is the right number. To me, there's not enough data out there for me to come back and say 3.75 is exactly the right number, but I am inclined to believe that it is somewhere north of 3 that is probably the right number for law enforcement services to break even each year with a cost index. Now, what Sheriff Watson indicated to me is that this is always negotiable. He feels like that this is his break-even point, and he didn't feel like he could go any lower than that. But he said, at any point in this contract, if the city feels like we want to just reassess and take a good hard look at things, open book, we can go in there, we can have that conversation.
Well, I think too, if we're gonna do a 5 year, and that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to get this thing on the books for 5 years, but if you look, if it's about, I was trying to do the math there real quick in my head. It's 25,000 a year. And our third year, we're down to 93. Then you're 25, we'll be at 50,000 in 5 years, still saving money. But, I'd like to have the sheriff on board for a long time, and maybe we grow a little bit and we can get some funding where it don't hurt our budget as bad. But I'm all about this right here for sure. I would just like to know if the sheriff is even close to the negotiable about a little bit of percentage drop because every annual thing is going to help us in 2 years. That 3% really would be almost nothing for us.
Mr. Mayor, as I indicated, he stated that there was no lower than 3.75 in his mind. He said he would think about it.
Okay, we would never stop the contract over it.
Yeah. And I also just for contrast, because, I, like you guys, want to get the very best bottom line for the city of Newberry. The 5th year would be $1,005,000. So after 5 years, we would be back to where we started. And our alternatives are, if we were in the MSTU still, it'd be 1.6 to 1.7 a year. And as our property values go up, it just keeps right on going up. And as the county commission raises the millage rate for the MSTU, it keeps right on going up. And our alternatives to contract with the city of High Springs or start our own, we're in the high 1.5s, 1.6 range, bare minimum police department for us. Now, we would have a higher level of service, but that's still a big gap between what we're paying for law enforcement and what we would be paying for some of our alternatives.
So again, like I said, I'm all about the sheriffs. There's nothing, that's what this community has had for years. And so I'm behind it. I just would like to see where we could save a buck, you know?
Absolutely.
Well, and I think, one of the, there is a reasonableness to saying, let's go back to 2017. This is what we initially agreed to, and let's just restart the clock at what we initially agreed to. I think, for this board to be able to go right to our residents and say, we exited a contract where we didn't think we were being treated fairly. We've entered into a contract
I think
that
we're
we
good.
actually agreed to. 5 years, we'll be back to where we're at today, where we would have been at today. And really, at this point, we've exhausted, if we don't want to continue this contract with ASO, it's accept the existing level of service that you get from ASO through property taxes, or start a Newberry Police Department. And I think our residents aren't quite happy with either of those options. We've discussed accepting the
Well, maybe
existing
things-
level, and that did not go well.
Let's keep our contract to keep the citizens where we got them. And, we know that the sheriff's on board with us. We haven't dropped the level of service to the citizens. We have got a little break here, and we've got some time now to talk to a new sheriff as time goes on.
I think this also solidifies a relationship with the sheriff where the city of Newberry and ASO could stand side by side in front of the BOCC and explain where this money is and how we came to the agreement. And so really, everybody should be content and happy if we can move forward here. Any other questions, Commissioner Coleman? I've got you on screen, so you can just shake your hand and at me if you're good. Go ahead, Commissioner Martin.
Where does the aspect of the SROs come into this play, and who's paying for that, where the state was spending money to?
Mr. Mayor, that's a great question, because we knew that since the inception of our contract, the legislature had clarified their expectation for school resource officers in schools. Way back in 2016, the first time we had a conversation about this, the school board was paying what they considered to be half of the SROs, and it was about $20,000 per school. And after the legislature came out with that now, and the sheriff would tell you that those officers are worth more than $100,000 a year. So the sheriff felt like they were being funded 20%. When the legislature clarified its role, it said that the school board is responsible, but that it was a partnership between local law enforcement. And so what has happened in Alachua County is the school board upped its ante. It now provides for each school, each SRO, $60,000 a year. And that's each school in the county. Within Alachua County, every school in Alachua County that has everyone has an SRO, some have two. They are funded at $60,000 a year by the school board. The balance, whatever that is funded by the local community that contributes to law enforcement. So in High Springs, city of High Springs taxpayers pay the difference. In Alachua, their taxpayers pay the difference. In Gainesville, their taxpayers pay the difference. And the rest of the schools are either in unincorporated Alachua County or Hawthorne or Archer. Both Hawthorne and Archer are in the MSTU. So they are making the case that their taxpayers are making up the difference. And all the schools in unincorporated Alachua County are being funded through the MSTU according to the sheriff. So that it looks like that the bulk of the cost is by the school board, but they're very consistent, and they're saying up to $60,000, or they're giving a check for $60,000 per officer. Whatever the difference is, if it's $60,000 more for a sheriff's deputy, or if it's no more because High Springs is doing something with part-timers, which is at least what Alachua did one year. They hired some part-time officers to be in there and said we didn't have to pay anymore. The local community is making up the difference. And in this instance, if the commission enters this agreement, we would be in keeping with with our peers in the county, that our contract would be making up the difference for those school resource officers. And if you'll remember, some 4 years ago, I did a really exhaustive analysis where how many students in each school were not from Newberry, and it was very exhaustive. We kind of re-pulled that back out and plug things in. And it's not exact because there's so many debatable items in there, but the cost of service back then, what we thought was the lowest that we could expect it would be in the mid fives is now much higher. We're in the sevens with the lowest possible best case scenario that we could ever justify. And depending on assumptions you make, it jumps up to right at $1 million. So that worksheet, again, I think that this is a true compromise. The BOCC and the sheriff make a very good case for a much higher value. We make a great case for a much lower value. We've kind of settled in the middle to get to this number that seems to save our residents money and still provides a level of service that our residents seem to desire.
To be honest, I haven't quite wrapped my head around the numbers when you put the SROs in. That just
I
keeps
didn't
giving
either.
me a headache, right?
There's ain't but 3 of them.
But I do know, I do know that Mike is correct, that the other cities have stepped in to make up the difference. So how that number ends up playing out for us, and because at the beginning in 2017, when we made this contract, there was no governor mandate, state mandate that there had to be SROs. And a large part of that contract was based on the fact that we wanted to have SROs in all 3 schools, and we were willing to pay for it. Well, the governor's mandate at the time said you have to have them, didn't say who was paying for them. So somewhere it fell between the county and ASO. Well, we've got a little bit more data now, and most of the cities around us anyway, I think probably fair to say most cities in the state have stepped up to make the same calculation that we just got to keep the SROs in the schools. And if we need to be a partner in that, we will be.
As we say, we can always go back and talk to the sheriff, anything, open door policy probably for a meeting.
And what's our exit is the same.
It would, yes,
Sound like
it'd
the
be a
time.
270-day exit notice by either party.
We hope it don't happen. I think this is gonna be a good partnership.
Okay, so I need a motion
Correct.
to either adopt, do you have a
Yeah,
recommended?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I'm sorry, we talk about it all the time. Lead with the recommended
Yes.
recommended action, and I failed to do so.
And with the chief of staff who's been listening to this, anything to add, or if you pleased with the conversation? You waited this whole time. No, I don't want to deprive you of the opportunity to weigh in,
Is she available?
but I still can't. You're still muted on your end. While we're waiting to see if she has anything, and just break right in, Miss Judd, if you do, will you read the recommended action?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the recommended action is to accept the conditions outlined in the updated law enforcement services contract and direct staff to prepare a final contract for consideration and approval. If you guys tell us to move forward, we'll go to the city attorney's office, draft these terms into a contract that looks very much like the one we're exiting, and we'll have it to you at our next meeting.
Ms. Judd, I see you've unmuted. Did you want to weigh in? You don't have to. Yes. I don't see her on the screen. She's on my screen. Okay, so we have recommended action to save our residents $140,000 this year and enter into a 5-year contract with a 3.75. Do I hear a motion for or against that recommendation?
I move to accept the conditions outlined and give Manager New the go ahead for final contract.
I have a motion from Commissioner Clark.
I think.
I have a second from Commissioner Maison. Any comments or questions from the dais? Commissioner Martin.
I have more questions and reservations, but I'm not going to hold up the motion on the floor, but I'll be voting against it only because I have other questions that are unanswered at the moment.
Okay, Commissioner Coleman. Good. Okay.
Do it, Mr. Mayor, do we
So-
need to pull the motion back and
No.
get this ironed out now?
we're not gonna have the answers to his questions until we have the contract in front. So there'll be a longer conversation.
Okay.
Afterwards. And so what will happen if this motion passes tonight, you'll see the contract.
Then
and
we'll have another
conversation. And then do we have two readings on this contract or is it just one? Just the one? Okay, so I have a motion probably seconded on the floor. Ladies and no more comments or questions on the motion, guys? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end. We swapped 7 and 8. So the law enforcement contract is the new item 7. We have a motion probably second on the floor to accept the terms that were just outlined by the city manager and have him bring back those terms in the contract at the next meeting. If you'd like to call in and make a comment or ask a question on the motion floor, is now the time to do so. You can accomplish that by dialing the number on your screen. That'll get you in the meeting. Once you're in the meeting, look at the bottom. You can see the little hand symbol. Click that hand symbol. Let us know you'd like to address the commission. We'll make sure you have the opportunity to do so. We're going to start with live comment, then we'll go to virtual comment. Do you have anyone live in the chamber who'd like to address the commission on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, Dallas, we have any hands raised? No more Jordan Marlowe's. I'm the only Jordan Marlowe left. Does Ms. Judd have her hand raised? Ms. Judd, would you like to weigh in? Ms. Judd, we're going to take your silence as ecstatic excitement for this contract, and we're going to have a roll call vote. We'll start with our online commissioner, Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Mazon. Commissioner Martin.
No.
Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1 with Commissioner Martin in dissent. That will move us to new item 7, which is the fiscal year 2021-22 budget calendar. Dallas, are you leading us through this conversation?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. As the commission is aware, every year as part of your budget process, the commission holds 4 public workshops to discuss the budget, followed by 2 public hearings to adopt the budget. We just want to make sure that the commission is good with the dates that we have suggested for your workshops. All 4 workshops are on Wednesday at 6 p.m. and the dates suggested are June 16th, July 21st, August 4th, and September 1st. So we're just looking for a head nod if those dates work so we can get those scheduled for this year's budget process.
Dallas, Wednesdays are church nights for a lot of folks around here. Is there a reason we did them all on Wednesdays?
It just works the best with the other meetings on the calendar and the other things going on.
And we bounce and get some of them off of that night. So folks who want to be here have the opportunity to mix a Tuesday or a Thursday in somewhere.
We can certainly try. I don't have my calendar available in front of me to
I know there's not a whole lot of churches that still meet on Wednesday night, but I know that we have some here in Newberry of folks who probably would come.
If you'd like, I can bring us back at the next meeting with alternate dates.
If no one shares the same concern, then we'll move forward. I hate to have them. It's one thing to have one on a Wednesday, but to have all of them on a Wednesday, I think isn't fair to making sure we can get to everybody. Everybody has a chance to attend. You know, each budget workshop will focus on sort of one thing, but you know, I wouldn't want to have them all on. I think
Let's look real quick.
Why don't we just ask Dallas and bring this back again with some other
Next
sprinkled in, instead of us all trying to look at our calendars right now and figure it out. That sound good? So do I need a motion to table this or can we just move on? We'll bring it back. Okay, we're going to move on to item 9, discussing our COVID-19 emergency orders and continuation of hybrid meetings. So as you know, we're still doing these hybrid meetings and I know that they have been fairly well attended and used through the Zoom and through YouTube. We have a lot of people who appreciate being able to call in, but I know we are also moving back towards putting the world back to some semblance of normalcy. So Mike or Dallas, did you have anything in particular? I know it gets a little confusing in terms of whose resolution we're following to do this. The governor has suspended things, but these hybrid meetings are actually happening under our own emergency order. So Mike, give us an outline here of how we're able to do this. And if we wanted to suspend them, what would that mean? If we wanted to continue them, what would that mean?
Mr. Mayor, as I understand it, and I think both Dallas, who kind of manages running these Zoom meetings, and the city attorney's office will have great input, and I welcome their input. But the governor's order ended our emergency orders. And our policy, it says that we can have these hybrid style meetings for emergency events. And so I think that we are at a crossroads where we need to end these hybrid meetings, but the city commission is not prevented or bound from continuing hybrid meetings under its regular suite of ways to conduct meetings. It would require us to amend our policies to allow it. But right now our charter says we have a couple of different styles of meeting, and it discusses how they are conducted. So we wouldn't be fooling with the charter, but policy would give us the ability to utilize hybrid meetings as a tool under certain scenarios or any way the commission really wishes for them to be. So the thought is that the emergency orders and the hybrid meetings that are related to a state of emergency are going away. Does the commission want staff to bring back a policy where we can utilize these hybrid meetings just under non-emergency standard? It gives the public a little more ability to tune into what we're doing. It gives us a little better ability for a commissioner that's not feeling well or a city attorney that's not feeling well to participate electronically. That's kind of the question that's out there. Mr. Lee or Mr. Attorney, have I missed anything?
Mr. Mayor, I would just clarify that the governor's emergency order does not end your current emergency order related to hybrid meetings. The governor's emergency order rescinds those emergency orders that infringe on personal rights and liberties of the citizens, which, unless the attorney can correct me, I don't believe hybrid meetings infringes on anybody's rights. So you can continue to operate underneath your existing emergency order. You could discontinue your emergency order, adopt a new order. You could adopt permanent changes to your rules of procedure, or we could continue to do what we're doing now. Staff is just looking for direction tonight. If you would like, we can bring this back with more hard policy changes if that's your direction. It looks like City Attorney Maltby would like to chime in as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Dallas.
Oh, Rich, thought that was me talking. There's an echo. Go ahead, Rich.
Your mic on?
It is, but it shouldn't be echoing.
I will lower my hand. There we go. Thank you, Dallas. Yeah, I would agree with what Dallas is saying. Essentially, as a matter of law, based on the current state of the Attorney General opinions that are out there, we can continue to move forward in a hybrid process. I mean, there's obviously two things to consider. One is the involvement of a commissioner. And in that case, we still have to have the physical in-person quorum. So nothing has changed there. And then it would be just maybe a matter of policy as far as whether we want to continue to conduct hybrids just to make it available to the public. So there's two things to think about. Specifically to the commissioner, what we would now pretty much exclusively refer to is the Attorney General opinion that was handed down about 5 years ago that talks about the participation of an absent member or commissioner. That can be done by interactive electronic technology when there are extraordinary circumstances. And the example is an illness. That is an example. It goes on to say that whether the absence of a member is due to a scheduling conflict constitutes such a circumstance, that is a determination that our board, using its good judgment, must make. So there may be some situations where it's sort of an ad hoc, what are the circumstances? But we can move forward in the current format that we have right now. Ultimately, we may want to develop some policies, as Manager New alluded to that really spells this out.
Okay, thank you, Rich. And I would say, I don't particularly have a problem with the Zoom. I don't mind having a computer here in front of me. I don't mind that. I am ready to end the 30-second delay between YouTube and having to kill that time. And I think it's fair to say to our residents, if you want to engage with us, you have to Zoom. If you just want to watch the meeting, you can watch it on YouTube, but there's a 30-second delay. Commissioner Martin?
Mr. Mayor, I echo the same concerns, and I think it's more advantageous for our city to get back to normal. I would make a motion to cease the emergency or the executive orders that we have in place, or the emergency orders we have in place, and institute a day certain that we can go back to in-person meetings. If a commissioner is not able to come, we still have an absentee policy, and that's understandable as well. That's going to happen from time to time. People are going to get sick, but that's kind of where I am. If calendar speaking, we're just talking about the next meeting that we're back in person, or the first meeting in June, I'm kind of indifferent. Actually, if we went back to normal for the next meeting, then the following P&Z meeting would be back in person as well at normal capacity. So in that scenario, it's probably better for the leadership of the city commission to take the first step and set the tone for the rest of the bylaw.
Okay, what was that a motion, or was that I'm willing to make that
Okay,
motion
let
after
me
the
read back.
conversation?
I'm okay at this point sunsetting and make a motion to sunset any of the emergency orders that we have, and then we go back to pre-COVID in-person meetings at our next commission meeting.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second for that? Okay, so I have a motion from Commissioner Martin, a second from Commissioner Clark. Before we move on with the conversation, because I want to make sure I understand, your motion would end the Zoom completely by the next meeting. Okay, so what you just say would end the Zoom completely by the next meeting. Did you understand
Yes.
that when you seconded it? That's not what Commissioner Martin. Right, but under normal circumstances, you would have to be in the hospital. You'd have to have like a doc. You'd have to have extraordinary circumstances. So I want to make sure you understood the second that you made. So
the motion is to go back to normal pre-COVID period.
for the next meeting, right? My question is to Commissioner Coleman. That would potentially exclude him from participating in the next meeting. I know you're really, really close, but we don't want to rush you. I take Commissioner Martin's point that the commission should lead the way before we make the P&Z go back. But we could also say we'll do the hybrid meetings until the middle of next month so that they do that.
Saying if he's ready or not.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So Commissioner Coleman, can you give us a little feedback, and remember that your wife knows where I live.
Next meeting, I'm for what they are. Let's get back to normal, because I have experienced all the bad stuff. I think it's time to go ahead and get back to normal and get going.
Okay, so you're okay with it. So I guess the only other question is, because again, Commissioner Martin's motion would end the Zoom. We come in next time. Public does not have the ability to Zoom in. If they want to engage with the commission, they come up here live. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on what we're voting on, and they know that. So I have a motion, probably second floor. Any other comments or questions from the dais about the Zoom? Because again, what I offered was no one else Zooms. I do the Zooming. And Commissioner Mays on. Yep.
So what you're saying is next meeting, we're doing away with class, doing away with YouTube, and if anybody wants to.
Right. YouTube was always
YouTube
there.
stays so they can still channel in.
But they
and
can't
watch it.
They can't call in through YouTube and ask a question. They
They
can't
can just
chat.
watch.
They just watch. So it's a passive.
Okay, so you gotta be, and so does that mean that we're all getting up here, all that's gone, no mask?
You can still wear a mask if you want to.
Okay.
Okay. Right, but we would have our city manager back here, up here on the dais, we have the city attorney. I can't remember how everybody, Mike was back there, we'll figure it out. We'll go watch an old meeting and see how it used to be. Yeah. It is helpful for me
Yeah,
to be.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, right now I gotta come back and forth. Get in that whiplash. Okay, any other questions on the motion on the floor? Okay, will you put up our phone number, Dallas? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are on item 9 of tonight's published agenda. This is discussing our emergency orders continuation of hybrid meeting. We have a motion on the floor to end hybrid meetings by the next meeting. So the next meeting, we would not offer Zoom. You'll need to come to the commission meeting live. That will be commissioners, public as well. If you'd like to call in and make a comment on that motion on the floor, now's the time to do so. You can dial the number on the screen. That'll get you in the meeting. Once you're in the meeting, look at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a little hand symbol. Click that hand symbol. That'll let us know you'd like to address the commission. We'll make sure you have the opportunity to do so. We're going to start with live comment in the chamber. Then we'll go to virtual comment. Anyone live in the chamber want to address the motion on the floor? Yeah, so we have any virtual hands raised?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Joy Glanzer.
Okay. Ms. Glanzer, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's me again. I'm happy to get back to normal. I just wanted to make sure that getting back to normal includes putting back all the chairs in the chamber so we can have a full capacity audience. Because if we have to be there, we want to make sure that we can get in there and have a seat. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think getting back to normal is the whole spectrum. Okay, do we have anybody else with their hand raised?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
I would recognize a comment in the chat from Commissioner Lawson. I've lost it. Who says she's in favor of keeping the citizens in touch by continuing hybrid meetings. Okay, if there are no more hands raised, virtual hands or live hands, we'll go for vote. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. That takes us to comment. City manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city commission, all of our elected officials received invitations from Sheriff Watson for a celebration for law enforcement's memorial this Friday afternoon. It begins at 5 o'clock, and I believe there's a meal at 5 o'clock. There's an event at 6 p.m. It's at the Veterans Memorial. It's off Tower Road of Southwest 41st Place, I believe. Any of our elected officials would like to attend, just let me or Amy know, and we'll get your RSVP sent in to make sure that you have a seat at the table. And Mr. Mayor, also just, we've already discussed it previously, but just to remind the commission and the community, Watermelon Festival is this weekend. I believe we've stated that the festival itself begins at 9, the parade begins at 10:30, line up at 10 o'clock. So come out and have a great time. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my comment.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk. I'm sorry, Mr. Attorney. Mr. Attorney first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say on behalf of the city attorney's office, welcome back, Commissioner Coleman. You're looking real strong, and it's been amazing to watch your progress, and we're really glad to see you sitting on the dais as we speak. So welcome back.
He's going to start playing tennis with us soon. Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk.
I don't have anything, Mr. Mayor, but I would like to welcome Commissioner Coleman back as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. And Commissioner, let's begin with Commissioner Coleman. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be back, and hopefully next meeting everything will go right, and I'll be in there. So, but I really appreciate all the support from everybody. Thank you.
We appreciate you. Commissioner Maison. Commissioner Martin. Commissioner Hart.
Thanks, staff, Mike, everybody for this.
And have you heard about whether you'll be able to participate in the parade?
I can't.
You can't participate. Okay, so we will need something for at least 3, and we'll goad Monty into being there as well. He loves to throw the candy. The lineup is at 10, so you could You could probably, don't forget the candy now. Right? Don't forget the candy to the kids. You gotta bring candy to the kids. You bring candy. Exactly. All right. Whatever the budget, we expect big, full-size Snickers bars, right? That's what the kids want. And if you get there 10, 10, 10, 15, you'll be fine. And the only thing I would say is don't forget to come over to the festival. They Watermelon Festival Committee loves to have you guys there to participate in the auction, especially all kinds of things. Yeah.
Tuxedo, I thought.
And staff, I RSVP to Sergeant Jacobson, but if you need to RSVP to just double check, that would be great. I don't know if you guys, if we had our presentation from our staff about the rural roads. I've talked to 2 of the county commissioners about that since then. They have been willing to have that conversation. So there seems to be a little bit difference in the information that's flowing. So I'm trying to make sure that that all of the elected officials involved in this are getting the same kind of information. So if you guys are talking with anybody, just reiterate 2011, the county staff gave us a presentation identifying 337 as number 5. Since then, 2 of those roads have been completed. So, you know, that's the message that we need to keep delivering. And that is all of my comments. Mark, your microphone was off when you gave your comments. So, but Commissioner Clark was just thanking the staff for their participation and eagerness in negotiating the contract with Clovis. That finishes up my comment. So we'll go to public comment. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of tonight's meeting. Again, we love to hear from our citizens. We set aside a longer period of the evening at the end of the meeting to hear from you. You have a 5-minute time period to talk to the commission about anything, whether it's on the agenda or not. If you'd like to call on the commission, address the commission, now's the appropriate time to do so. You can call us out by dialing phone number on the screen. That'll get you in the meeting. Once you're in the meeting, lose the bottom screen, see a little hand symbol. Click that hand symbol. Let us know you'd like to address the commission. We'll make sure you have the opportunity to do so. We're going to start with live comment from the chamber, then we'll go to virtual comment. Do we have anyone live who'd like to address the commission?